Hey everyone, and welcome back for another deep dive with us.
Yeah, welcome back.
Today we're going to be looking at something really fundamental to ABA.
Yeah.
And that's the science behind it all.
The why.
Yeah, the why it works.
Mm-hmm.
And so this is really important because we spend a lot of time talking about the how-tos.
Right.
But if you don't know the why, then the how-to doesn't matter as much.
Exactly. And it can really make you a better practitioner, I think, if you understand that why behind what we do.
Absolutely. So today we're going to be looking at Cooper, Heron, and Heward's 1987 definition of science.
Yes.
And we're also going to be taking a look at Skinner's Science and Human Behavior from 1953, just to kind of get an idea of what makes ABA scientific.
Right.
So let's jump right in.
Okay.
So what is it that makes ABA scientific?
So Cooper, Heron, and Heward define science as a systematic approach to understanding natural phenomena that's based on determinism, empiricism, experimentation, replication, parsimony, and philosophical doubt.
Whoa, that's a mouthful.
It is a mouthful.
So what does all that mean?
Yeah, so let's break that down a little bit.
Okay.
Determinism is the assumption that the universe is a lawful and orderly place, and that all phenomena occur as the result of other events. So in other words, behavior is not random. Behavior happens for a reason.
Oh, so like there's a cause and effect.
Exactly. There's a cause and effect.
Yeah.
So if we can figure out what those causes are, then we can better predict and control the behavior.
So it's like detective work almost.
Yes, I love that analogy.
Okay, cool.
So then we have empiricism.
Okay.
And that's the objective observation of the phenomena of interest. So what that means is we're looking at facts, not opinions, not what we think should happen or what we feel should happen, but what is actually happening.
Okay, so it's like really relying on evidence and data.
Exactly. Data is king in science and ABA.
Gotcha. So that's determinism and empiricism. What's next?
All right, so then we get into experimentation, which is the basic strategy of most sciences. It's a controlled comparison of some measure of the phenomenon of interest under two or more different conditions. So in other words, we're manipulating variables to see how they affect behavior.
Okay, so you're not just observing, you're actually testing out different things to see what happens.
Exactly. We're trying to figure out those cause and effect relationships.
Okay, that makes sense. And then you said replication. What is that?
So replication is repeating experiments. And the idea is that if we repeat the experiment and get the same results, then we can be more confident that our findings are accurate.
Oh, that's interesting. So it's not just a one and done kind of thing. You have to do it over and over again.
Right. We want to make sure it wasn't just a fluke. We want to make sure that what we're seeing is actually a real effect.
That makes a lot of sense. So that's replication, and then there's a parsimony.
Right. Parsimony. So parsimony is kind of the idea that the simplest explanation is usually the best.
Keep it simple.
Yeah, keep it simple, stupid. So we all use that in our daily lives, too. Like if you hear a noise in your attic, you're probably going to assume it's a squirrel or something. You're probably not going to assume it's like a ghost or a monster.
Right, right.
So it's the same thing in science. If we have two explanations for a behavior, we're going to go with the simpler one, unless there's evidence to support the more complex one.
So you're not jumping to conclusions.
Exactly.
Okay, so we got parsimony and then philosophical doubt.
Philosophical doubt. So that's kind of the idea that we should always be questioning our assumptions and our findings. So just because we found something to be true in one study doesn't mean that it's going to be true in all situations.
Oh, so you're always kind of second-guessing yourself a little bit?
Yeah, we're always trying to find ways to improve our understanding of behavior.
Okay, so those are like the pillars of science.
Right.
And then you mentioned Skinner as well.
Yes.
And he had kind of a famous quote about science.
Yeah, so Skinner said that science is, first of all, a set of attitudes. It's a disposition to deal with facts rather than what someone has said about them.
Okay, so he was really big on like focusing on those facts.
Absolutely.
And evidence-based practice. And so how does Skinner kind of fit in with ABA?
So Skinner was a behaviorist, and he did a lot of research with animals. And he found that the same principles of learning that apply to animals also apply to humans.
Oh, so like even though he was working with pigeons and rats and stuff, those principles apply to people too.
Exactly.
Okay, that's really interesting.
So he came up with a lot of the core principles that we use in ABA today, like reinforcement, extinction, stimulus, discrimination.
Now, reinforcement, that's something that we hear all the time.
Yes.
In ABA, it's like it seems like such a big part of what we do.
Yeah.
So can you just kind of remind us what reinforcement is?
So reinforcement is anything that increases the future frequency of a behavior. So when a behavior is followed by a consequence, and that behavior becomes more likely to occur again in the future, that consequence is a reinforcer.
Okay, so it's not just any consequence. It has to actually increase the behavior
Exactly.
for it to be a reinforcer.
Yeah.
Okay, and so how do we know what's reinforcing?
That's a great question, and it's something that we have to be really careful about. Because what's reinforcing for one person might not be reinforcing for another person.
Okay, so it's not one size fits all.
Definitely not.
Okay, and so we need to make sure that we're actually using reinforcers that are going to work.
Right.
And so what are some things that can go wrong with reinforcement?
So one thing that can go wrong is that we might accidentally reinforce the wrong behavior. So for example, if we're trying to teach a child to sit at the table and we give them attention every time they get up, we might actually be reinforcing the getting up behavior.
Oh, wow, so it can almost backfire on you
Yeah, it definitely can.
if you're not careful.
So it's really important to be aware of what we're reinforcing.
And to be really consistent with it, too.
Exactly.
Okay, so that's reinforcement. Anything else about kind of the scientific basis of ABA that you wanted to touch on before we move on?
I think it's just important to remember that ABA is a science.
Yeah.
And that we're always trying to improve our understanding of behavior.
Yes, and that there's always room for improvement and growth.
Absolutely.
Awesome. Well, this has been a really great kind of overview of the scientific foundations of ABA.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's really important for us to kind of keep this in mind
Yes.
as we're working with clients and as we're talking about ABA.
Right.
So, last time we were talking about how ABA is a science
Yeah.
and, all those different pillars of science.
Like determinism and empiricism, all that. Yeah, all of that.
Yes.
Well, those are really important for research designs.
Okay.
Because if we're going to say that our interventions are effective,
Right.
we need to be able to prove it.
Prove it. Yeah, absolutely.
We can't just say, oh, well, it worked for this one person, so it must work for everybody.
Right. You need the data.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
So that's where research designs come in.
Okay, so what are some of the research designs that we use in ABA?
So some of the most common ones are reversal designs
Yeah.
and multiple baseline designs.
Okay, I remember we talked about those a little bit last time.
Yeah, so let's get into a little bit more detail.
Okay, sounds good.
So let's start with reversal designs.
Okay.
Sometimes they're called ABAB designs,
Okay.
and they're basically a way to see if an intervention is actually working.
Okay, so how do they work?
So basically what we do is we have two phases,
Mm-hmm.
a baseline phase and a treatment phase.
Okay.
And we alternate between those two phases.
Okay.
So in the baseline phase, we're just observing the behavior.
Oh, without doing anything to try to change it.
So you're just taking beta.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
We're just collecting data.
Okay.
And then in the treatment phase, we're implementing our intervention.
Okay.
And we're seeing if the behavior changes.
Gotcha. And so you're going back and forth between baseline and treatment.
Right.
Okay.
So for example, let's say we're working with a child who's hitting.
Okay.
In the baseline phase, we would just observe how often the child is hitting.
Without trying to stop it.
Yeah, we're not trying to stop it. We're just observing.
Okay.
And then in the treatment phase, we would implement our intervention.
So like maybe giving them a reward for not hitting.
Exactly, yeah. Or maybe we're teaching them a different way to communicate their frustration.
Okay.
And then we would go back to baseline
Okay.
and see if the hitting behavior increases again.
So it's like you're taking away the intervention to see if it was really working.
Right. And then we would go back to treatment
Okay.
and see if the hitting behavior decreases again. So if the hitting is decreasing when the treatment's in place,
Yeah.
and it's increasing when you take it away,
Right.
that's pretty good evidence that the treatment's working.
Exactly.
Okay.
And so we do that a couple of times just to make sure that it's not a coincidence.
Right. It's not just a fluke.
Right.
Okay. That makes a lot of sense.
So that's reversal designs.
Okay.
And then multiple baseline designs are a little bit different.
Okay. How are they different?
So with multiple baseline designs, we're not actually reversing anything.
Okay.
Instead, we're looking at the effects of our intervention across different settings,
Okay.
behaviors, or individuals.
So you might be using the same intervention, but in different places?
Right, or with different people.
Okay.
So for example, let's say we're working with a child who's having trouble paying attention in school.
Okay.
We could use a multiple baseline design across settings.
Okay.
So we would implement our intervention in one setting first, like maybe in the classroom. And then once we see an improvement in that setting,
Yeah.
we would implement the intervention in another setting.
Like maybe at home?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
And so we would keep doing that until we've implemented the intervention in all of the settings.
So you're basically staggering the intervention
Right. Yeah.
across different
Right.
settings to see if it's working in all of them.
Exactly.
Okay. I like that.
And so if we see that the child's attention improves in each setting, after we implement the intervention,
Yeah.
but not before,
Okay.
then that's pretty good evidence that the intervention is working.
That it's not just something else that's going on.
Right.
Yeah. Okay, that makes sense.
And so multiple baseline designs can also be used across behaviors.
Okay.
So, for example, if we're working with a child who's engaging in several challenging behaviors, we could target one behavior at a time.
Okay.
And then once we see an improvement in that behavior, we would target the next behavior. And so we would keep doing that until we've targeted all of the behaviors.
So it's the same idea as the settings,
Yeah,
but just with different behaviors.
exactly. And then finally, multiple baseline designs can also be used across individuals.
Okay. How would that work?
So let's say we're working with a group of children who are all having trouble with the same skill.
Okay.
Like maybe they're all having trouble with reading.
Gotcha.
We could implement our intervention with one child first. And then once we see an improvement with that child, we would implement the intervention with the next child.
Okay.
And so we'd keep doing that until we've implemented the intervention with all of the children.
Okay.
And so if we see that each child's reading skills improve after we implement the intervention, but not before, then that's pretty good evidence that the intervention is working.
I like that.
So, yeah, those are just a couple of the research designs that we use in ABA.
Awesome. And so, like I said, this is really important because if we're going to say that ABA works, we need to have the data to back it up.
Exactly.
Awesome. Well, thanks for breaking those down for us.
Yeah, of course.
Well, hey, this has been another great deep dive.
Yeah, I had fun.
Yeah, me too. And thanks for joining us, everyone. We'll see you next time.
See ya.